Hello everyone and welcome! Today we have something epic in store for you all who love painting and miniature crafting. We're diving into an incredible duo from Loot Studios, the mighty Gardain Firebeard, a fearless dwarven warrior, and his legendary companion Goldenhorn, the armored battle ram. We'll be bringing these two legendary characters to life with detailed painting techniques that make their intricate designs and personalities stand out. Whether you're here to pick up some painting tips, learn about color schemes, or just love watching miniature art in action, stick around as we take you on this creative journey. Let's get started.
We're going to start off with Gardain's face, and for that we'll be using the airbrush. The paints we'll be working with are Vallejo Dwarf Skin, Basic Skin Tone and Skin Tone. These three tones will give Gardain a rich dwarven complexion and will apply them directly without mixing, so you can get a clean layered effect right out of the bottle. Let's begin with Dwarf Skin as a base coat. This tone provides that perfect, warm undertone suited for Gardain's hardy, battle-worn look. Load it up in the airbrush and apply a smooth, even coat across his face. Be sure to work in light layers to avoid pulling and to keep all the details crisp. Make sure to spray from multiple angles to get full coverage, especially around the eyes, nose and under the beard, where shadows will naturally fall. Once the base coat is dry, we'll move on to basic skin tone for the shadows. Using the airbrush, lightly apply this tone to the recess areas under the brow, along the nose and under the cheekbones. The key here is control. Aim for soft transitions so the darker areas blend naturally in the base. Now we'll use the skin tone to add highlights. This will bring out the highest points of Gardain face, the cheekbones, the bridge of the nose and the forehead. Now that we've got the base tones down, it's time to add some extra texture and realism to Gardain's face with speckling effect. For this, we'll be using Vallejo's Barbarian Skin and applying it with low pressure on the airbrush. This technique will create a subtle, natural speckling effect, perfect for bringing Gardain's rugged, weathered look to life. To get started, make sure your airbrush is set to low pressure, around 10-15 psi, so the paint comes out in small, controlled droplets. Load up Barbarian Skin into the airbrush and lightly mist it over the face, focusing on areas like cheeks, forehead and chin. The goal here is to add slight imperfections and color variations to give Gardain's skin a more lifelike, weathered appearance. Next up, we're going to apply some washes to add more depth and richness to Gardain's face. We'll be using Vallejo Game Color washes in yellow, red and blue. Each one will serve a different purpose to bring out the facial details and create natural, subtle color variations. Now we're going to work on Gardain's eyes, which will really bring his face to life. We're aiming for a strong, focused expression with his gaze directed slightly to the left. Let's start by blocking out the base colors. The first step is to paint the entire eye area with black. This will serve as the base and help define the eye shape. Using the fine detail brush, carefully fill the eye sockets. This will also create a good shadow effect for the next layers. Next, we'll move on to off-white. After the black base has dried, we will carefully paint over the black, leaving a thin outline around the edges. This off-white will form the whites of the eyes, but the black base helps to make them pop more naturally and avoids the harshness of pure white. Make sure to leave a thin black outline around the eyes to keep the definition clear. This is the delicate step, so take your time. Once the off-white layer has dried, it's time to carefully add the black center for the pupils. Use a fine-tipped brush to paint small black dots in the center of each eye. Since Gardain eyes are looking slightly to the left, position the black dots a bit off-center, towards the left side of each eye. This step is crucial for getting the expression right, so make sure the placement is consistent on both eyes. Now for the eye color. I'll be using medium olive as a base, followed by a highlight of lime green. Start by filling in the pupil area with medium olive, ensuring you keep the same leftward direction for the gaze. Once the layer is dry, add a tiny highlight of lime green just around the center of the pupil. This will give his eyes more depth and realism, making them appear more alive and alert. To finish off the eyes, we'll place a small black dot in the center of the green iris. This will serve as the final pupil detail. Make sure to use a very fine brush and again ensure the dots are positioned slightly to the left, keeping that consistent gaze direction. And there we have it. Gardain's eyes now have depth and intensity, with a piercing focused glaze looking to the left. The combination of the olive and lime green really brings out the dwarven trait and character. His eyes look sharp, determined and full of life. With Gardain's eyes complete, it's time to focus on his beard. The beard is a big part of his character, so let's bring it to life with rich colors and highlights. We'll start with a base color mix, followed by 2 levels of highlights to create depth and texture. For the base color, I'm using 1-to-1 mix of orange brown and mahogany brown. This combination provides a rich, earthly tone with a warm, reddish brown tint. Using a medium-sized brush, I'll carefully cover the entire beard, making sure to get into all the grooves and details. Take your time to apply this layer evenly, as it forms the foundations for the highlights. This warm, earthly tone will give Gardain's beard a natural, fiery look. Once the base layer has dried, it's time to add some middle highlights. For this step, I'm using orange brown on its own. With a slightly smaller brush, I'll go over the raised areas of the beard, focusing on strands that catch the light. Use a light-controlled hand to create a gradually transition between the base color and the highlights. This layer will help bring out the texture of each individual strand, making the beard look fuller and more vibrant. The final step, I'll add orange fire as a finishing highlight. This bright, fiery color will add a striking contrast, emphasizing the outermost edges and tips of the beard. With a fine-tipped brush, lightly edge highlight the ends of the beard strands to give them sunlit glow. These final highlights really help to bring out the fiery dwarven look that fits Gardain's character. Be careful not to overdo it. Just a touch on the highest points is enough to make the color pop. Now that the beard is complete, let's move on to painting Gardain's hood and the cloth. For this section, I'll be using medium olive, which will give these areas a natural, rugged feel, perfectly suited for a dwarf adventurer like Gardain. I'm starting by covering the entire hood and the cloth section on his torso with medium olive. Using the medium brush, apply a smooth, even coat, making sure to work the paint into the fabric folds and details. This color not only contrasts nicely with the rich tones of his beard, but also gives the figure a sense of rugged practicality. As you apply the medium olive, focus on following the natural flow of the fabric. The folds and crevices on the hood and cloth are an opportunity to add depth later on, so be sure to coat these areas throughout. This base color will help accentuate the textures as we build up highlights and shadows in the next steps. Once you've applied the medium olive base coat, take a moment to check for any areas that might need a bit more coverage. The goal is to have a consistent, even tone throughout. If needed, you can go over any lighter areas to ensure a solid, smooth finish before moving to highlights. With the hood and torso cloth complete, we're now moving on to the pelt section. Initially, I considered painting it in grey tones, but I decided to take a different route to achieve a richer look. Off camera, I airbrushed Agrex Earthshade over the entire pelt. This wash adds a deep, earthly tone that will serve a fantastic foundation for our highlights. The Agrex Earthshade will help to enhance the natural texture of the pelt while providing depth and shadow. Now let's bring the pelt to life with some dry brushing. For this step, I'm starting with chocolate brown. Using a dry brush technique, I lightly apply this color over the raised areas of the pelt. The goal is to create a natural, worn look that suggests wear and tear from adventuring. Next, I'll use cork brown for additional highlights, again using the dry brush technique. I'll apply this color to the tips and edges of the pelt. This layering will give the pelt a rich, warm tone, while enhancing its texture and making it pop against the other elements of the figure. To finish off the pelt, I create a highlight mix of chocolate brown and bone white. This blend will provide a lighter, more striking highlight, adding a final touch of dimension to the pelt. Using the dry brush technique, I'll focus on the highest points and edges, ensuring the pelt looks vibrant and full of life. After taking a break from the pelt, I'm moving on to the leather parts on Gardain's upper body, specifically the belts and bracers. These elements add a lot of detail and character to his overall look. First, I'll start with wider belt, painting it with red leather. This deeper rich tone will help the belt stand out and contrast nicely with the other colors in Gardain's outfit. I'm using a medium brush to ensure smooth, even coverage, making sure to get into the recessed details on the belt. Now let's focus on the bracers, which I'll be painting with flat earth. This natural earthly tone is perfect for the leather armor look. Using the fine brush, I'll carefully cover each bracer, paying attention to the right details and edges. This will serve as a strong base for adding highlights later on. Next, I'm moving on to the rope-like outline along the edges of the wider belt. For this, I'll be using chocolate brown. This darker shade will help define the edges and make the belt appear more detailed. Moving on to the thinner belt above the wider one, I'm using orange brown. This shade provides a nice contrast with the red leather of the wider belt. I'm applying this color with a small brush, making sure to keep the lines crisp and distinct between the two belts. At the same time, I'll use orange-brown on the leather straps around Gardain's bracers. These straps add extra detail to the bracers, making them look more functional and worn. With a fine brush, I paint each strap carefully, matching the tone with the thinner belt for cohesive look across Gardain's gear. Now that we've established the base colors on Gardain's leather elements, I'm adding a touch to bring out that authentic leather texture. I'll be using copper brown on the red leather sections and wasteland brown on the orange-brown areas. These are express color paints, which are great for creating an inconsistent, natural look that mimics real leather. Starting with copper brown, I'm going over all the red leather elements, including the wider belt. These speed paints have a semi-transparent quality that allows the base color to show throughout, giving the leather a worn, natural look. I'm applying it in light strokes, letting the paint settle on unevenly to emphasize the texture. Next, I'm moving to the thinner belt and leather straps on the bracers with wasteland brown. This shade complements the orange-brown base, adding depth and variation. The express color works well here as it creates an organic weathered effect. I'm letting the paint flow naturally over the surface, allowing it to pull in some areas and thin out in others. This gives each piece that rugged, uneven look, perfect for worn leather. Using the express color paints really brings out a leathery, tactile feel to Gardain's gear. The copper brown on the red leather and wasteland brown on the orange-brown areas give each piece a unique, handcrafted look. It's a quick way to add texture and gives the impression of leather that's seen years of use and adventure. After working on the leather elements, I decided to return to the pelt to enhance its depth with some shadows. I'll be using Seraphim Sepia throughout the airbrush, which will add warm, rich shadows to the fur texture, making it look more dynamic and lifelike. Starting with the airbrush, I'm applying Seraphim Sepia over the pelt. This shade creates subtle, warm shadows, giving the fur a natural depth. By building up the color gradually, I can achieve soft transitions, enhancing the texture while keeping the overall look consistent. I'm focusing on the recesses areas, letting the shadows bring out a rough, uneven surface of the fur. While I have the Seraphim Sepia in the airbrush, I'm also adding shadows to the hood. The soft, warm tone of this color works well on the hood fabric, adding dimension and making it look more worn and rugged. I'm directing the airbrush to the areas under the folds and along the edges where shadows would not naturally fall for a more realistic effect. With the Seraphim Sepia in place, both the pelt and hood have a richer, more three-dimensional look. The shadows add depth and realism, creating a sense of wear and age that complements Gardain's rugged appearance. It's a subtle but impactful step that makes the textures feel more lifelike. Now I'm circling back to the leather belts and straps to add some delicate highlights. For this I'll be using an angle shader brush and cork brown, which will provide a warm, natural highlight that complements the underlying colors perfectly. With the angle shader brush loaded with cork brown, I'm carefully applying highlights along the outlines of the belts and straps. By gently dragging the brush along the edges, I create a subtle contrast that makes each piece look more defined. These highlights simulate light reflecting of the worn leather, enhancing the overall realism. Next, I'm moving to the hood and cloth fabric on Gardain's torso. I'll be using cork brown for dry brushing to give these areas a dirtier, more rugged look. I load the brush with a small amount of paint, wipe off the excess, and then lightly drag it over the fabric surface. This technique catches the raised areas, adding a worn texture that enhances the sense of age and use. Using cork brown here helps to simulate the appearance of dirt and wear, making the hood and clothing feel like they've been throughout countless adventures alongside Gardain. This step adds character and realism, emphasizing the well-traveled appearance of his gear. Now that we've highlighted the belt, it's time to add some depth and definition using a dark brown panel liner. This will enhance the details and make the belts look more realistic by emphasizing the creases and recessed areas. Now we're moving on to the metallic parts of Gardain's armor. For the base coat, I'm using a mix of plate mail metal and silver. This combination will create a bright, polished metal look, giving the armor a solid foundation before adding any shading or weathering. I'm starting by applying this metallic mix evenly over the armor plates. The plate mail metal provides a strong, durable tone, while the silver adds a hint of brightness, making the armor look well crafted and reflective. This mixture gives a clean metallic base that really captures the light, highlighting the intricate shapes and colors of each armor piece. I'm focusing on even coverage, making sure the metallic finish is consistent across all areas. The base layer will serve as a great foundation for additional shading, which will bring out the details even further. the plate mail, metal and silver mix in place, the armor is starting to come to life. The metallic finish catches the light beautifully, adding a sense of realism and durability to Gardain's gear. This bright, reflective look will contrast nicely with the earthly tones of the leather and fabric, giving a dynamic balance to overall figure. Now that the armor plates have a solid metallic base, it's time to bring out the golden accents. For this I'm using greedy gold to paint all the Gardain's armor ornaments and trinkets. This will add a luxurious touch that complements the silver tones and make the details pop. Using a fine brush, I'm carefully painting each of the ornaments and trinkets with greedy gold. This gold tone has warm, slightly aged look that contrasts beautifully with the silver armor. It's perfect for giving these smaller details a bit of elegance and making them stand out against the cooler metallic base. I'm focusing on the intricate designs like the buckles, clasps and decorative edges to make sure every element is touched with the bit of gold. The key here is precision, so I'm taking my time to ensure each detail is covered without overlapping onto the silver armor. Now I'm moving on to the washing process for all the metallic elements. To add depth and a bit of weathering, I'm using Nuln Oil. This shade will help bring out the intricate details in the armor and give it a more rugged, battle-worn look. After applying it, I'll be dabbing off the excess with a sponge to keep the finish natural and textured. Next up, I'm turning my attention to the pouches on Gardain's belt. To start, I'm applying a base coat of oak brown to both pouches. This rich earthly brown will serve as a solid foundation for any additional highlights or weathering we'll add later. Using a medium brush, I'm carefully coating the two pouches on the belt with oak brown. This color has warm, natural tone that works perfectly for leather accessories, complementing the other elements of Gardain's gear. I'm making sure to cover all visible areas evenly to create a consistent base. Now I am adding some detail to the claws on the pelt by painting them with cork brown. This color has a soft, natural tone that works perfectly for the claws, giving them a slightly weathered look while helping them stand out against the darker fur. While I have the cork brown on my palette, I've decided to use it to add additional highlights to the pelt. I will give it a bit more depth and texture, helping the fur stand out to look more dynamic. I'm using brush, applying light strokes over the raised areas to bring out the details without overwhelming the darker base colors. By building up these subtle highlights, the pelt gains a more lifelike appearance, adding even more depth to Gardain's rugged look. Now that we have a solid base coat on the pouches, I'm going to add some highlights using leather brown. By dry brushing this color, I'll be able to create a subtle weathered effect that makes the pouches look like they've seen some use, bringing out the texture in the leather. Now let's move on to adding a pop of color to Gardain's gems. I'm using bloody red to paint this, which will create a striking contrast against the metallic and earthly tones of the armor and accessories. For the final touch on the upper body, I'm adding some highlights to the pelt claws with ivory. This color will give the claws a bit more depth and make them stand out, adding a subtle but effective finishing detail. Now moving on to the lower part of Gardain's body. I'm starting with the pants fabric. I'll be using medium olive for this, keeping it consistent with the cloth on the upper body to maintain a cohesive look throughout the figure. I'm applying a solid base coat of medium olive across the pants using smooth, even brush strokes. This color ties the pant back to the hood and torso, creating a unified earthly tone that complements the rest of Gardain's outfit. As I work on the pants, I'm being careful to get into all the folds and creases, ensuring full coverage. The medium olive has a natural, rugged feel, fitting well with the character overall aesthetics. Now let's add some character to Gardain's outfit by painting the tartan skirt. I'll be using angel green for this step, which will give the skirt a vibrant, rich look while enhancing the overall color palette. Now let's simply paint the belt with oak brown and get on to painting the tartan pattern. Let's dive into painting the tartan pattern on the skirt. I'll start by applying pure red into designated areas of the pattern. This bold color will create a striking contrast against the green fabric, adding vibrancy to Gardain's outfit. Using a fine brush, I'm carefully applying pure red to the appropriate sections of the tartan. It's important to stay within the lines to maintain the pattern integrity while ensuring that the coverage is even. Once the pure red is in place, I'll move on to Imperial Navy. This dark blue will fill in the altering section, providing depth and a classic tartan look. The Imperial Navy goes on smoothly, contrasting nicely with a pure red and creating the signature tartan effect. I'm making sure to blend the edges slightly where the two colors meet for a more natural transition. For the final touch on the tartan pattern, I'll highlight the Imperial Navy sections with crystal blue. This bright hue will add a pop of brightness and enhance the depth of the navy, making the tartan stand out even more. Using a small brush, I'm applying crystal blue sparingly on the raised areas and edges of the navy sections. This technique helps create a dynamic look, giving the tartan a lively and textured appearance. Moving on to the two letter straps that hang in front the tartan skirt. I'll be using orange brown to give these straps a rich, warm letter appearance later on. Next, we're moving on to the hip protector. I'll be applying oak brown as the base color, which will provide a sturdy, natural look that complements the overall design of Gardain's armor. Continuing with the painting process, it's time to address the leather parts of the boots. I'll be using orange brown, similar to how we painted the upper body leather elements to create a cohesive look throughout Gardain's outfit. Using small brush, I'm applying orange brown to the leather sections of the boots. This rich hue will enhance the texture and give the boots a worn, rugged appearance consistent with the overall theme of the figure. I'm being careful to get into all crevices and details, ensuring a throughout coverage that showcases the leather natural grain and character. Now I'm proceeding with the leather parts by applying wasteland brown over the orange brown base. This step will add depth and texture similar to what we've done with the upper body leather elements. With a clean brush, I'm gently applying wasteland brown over the leather sections of the boots. This color will introduce an uneven, worn look that mimics the natural variations found in leather, enhancing its realism. After applying wasteland brown, the boots now have a rich textured appearance that complements the rest of Gardain's attire. This process brings the character to life, emphasizing the ruggedness and the practicality expected of an adventurer. Next, I'm taking cork brown to texture the belt, aiming to create a look similar to that of a rope. This detail will enhance the visual interest and add the character's rugged charm. Using a small brush, I'm applying cork brown to the belt, working carefully to create that rope-like texture. I'm focusing on the edges and grooves, adding small strokes to mimic the twists and turns of a rope. This technique will give the belt a more dynamic appearance, making it stand out against the surrounding elements of the figure. Now we'll repeat the same pattern, this time focusing on the outline of the hip protector. After applying the cork brown, the outline of the hip protector now beautifully matches the textured elements of the belt. The detail not only ties the entire look together but also emphasizes the character's craftsmanship and attention to detail. Next, I'm using dry brushing technique with cork brown to create the illusion of dirt and dust on both the skirt and pants. This technique will enhance the realism and provide a more weathered look to Gardain's clothing. Using a dry brush, I'm lightly applying cork brown across the skirt and pants. The key here is to use minimal paint on the brush to create subtle highlights that suggest wear and tear. By focusing on the raised areas, this technique will create the effect of accumulated dirt, adding depth and character to the fabric, making it appear as though Gardain has been on many adventures. After dry brushing with cork brown, the skirt and pants now have a beautifully textured appearance reminiscent of a well-traveled adventurer. This attention to detail adds realism and narrative to Gardain's character, suggesting stories of his past journeys. Next, we will focus on painting all the metal elements of Gardain. I'm using a mix of plate mail metal and silver for this step to achieve a brilliant metallic finish. I've mixed plate mail metal with silver to create a vibrant metallic color. Using a detail brush, I'm carefully applying this mixture to all the metal parts, ensuring an even coverage that captures the light beautifully. This combination will give Gardain armor a polished, well-maintained look, reinforcing the impression of a seasoned warrior. Once the metallic elements are done, I'll move on to the ornaments and trinkets, which will be painted with greedy gold. This will add a touch of elegance and richness to the overall appearance. Using a fine brush, I'm applying greedy gold to all the decorative elements. This color will bring a sense of luxury and significance to Gardain's attire, enhancing his character and status. With the metallic elements and ornaments completed, Gardain now shines with a stunning combination of silver and gold. These details not only add visual appeal, but also tell a story of a well-respected warrior, adorned with precious trinkets from his adventures. Now we're applying Nuln Oil wash to the metallic elements on Gardain's lower body, just like we did for the upper body. This step will deepen the shadows and enhance the details of the metalwork. Using a clean brush, I'm carefully applying Nuln Oil wash over all the metallic areas. The wash will settle into the crevices and provide a depth to the shiny surfaces, creating a more realistic look. After applying a wash, I'll gently dab off any excess with a clean cloth or a sponge. This ensures that we retain the metallic sheen while still benefiting from the added shadows and definition. It's time to highlight the silver elements using a dry brush technique. This will add a refined touch and enhance the details, making the armor look even more striking. Now we're moving on to the last part of the lower body, the signal horn. This piece adds a unique touch to Gardain's character, symbolizing his role as a seasoned guardian. We'll start by base coating the horn with bone white. This provides a light, natural-looking base color, setting the stage for the warmer tones we'll be adding. Once the base coat is dry, I'm applying a glaze of cork brown over the lower part of horn. This technique adds soft warm tone while allowing the base color to subtly show throughout. To deepen color and add some texture, I'll go over it with leather brown next, focusing on the areas where the shadows would naturally fall. This layered approach creates a realistic worn look, perfect for Gardain's signal horn. To finish off the signal horn, I'm applying a soft tone wash. This will bring out the textures and add a touch of shadow, making the horn look more realistic. Now let's bring out the ornamental details on the signal horn. I'll be using brass for these accents, giving them a warm metallic shine that complements the earthly tones of the horn. We're finally moving on to Gardain's Warhammer, the symbol of his strength and resilience. This piece will bring everything together, completing Gardain's formidable look. To start, I'm covering the entire Warhammer with plate mail metal. This gives it a solid metallic foundation, providing that heavy forged steel looks perfect for a weapon of this caliber. Once the base layer is in place, I'm moving on to ornamental details with greedy gold. This color adds a luxurious contrast, enhancing the Warhammer's intricate design and giving it that refined battle-hardened appearance. Finally, for a touch of bold color, I'm painting the central gem on the Warhammer with bloody red. This vibrant red gem stands out against the metallic tones, adding a focal point that draws the eye and gives the weapon a powerful, almost mystic quality. With that, we've finished part 1 of Gardain's Firebeard's journey. From the first expression on his face to the powerful details on his Warhammer, Gardain is looking ready for action. In part 2, we'll bring his loyal companion Goldenhorn to life, adding the finishing touches to complete this epic duo. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. I'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments, so feel free to share. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in part 2.